And we're back for the 8th and final division preview special.
We made it.
We made it. The Old Souls Football Podcast back for the most interesting division, I would say, in all of football, which happens to be the division of our two favorite teams. So
finally, it's interesting. It has been interesting in the past, but it's been a couple years.
Yeah, I don't like it being interesting. I like it the way it was.
You like it when Green Bay is got the division wrapped up by Thanksgiving.
Well, we don't normally wrap it up that early. What ends up happening is like y'all get like a false sense of hope, or Detroit gets a false sense of hope.
Yeah.
And then like we rip it away from
Green
you.
Bay, Green Bay rips it away in December.
And then if we have a lot of injuries, what ends up happening is Minnesota just wins the division. So
yeah.
Like if we have a down year, Minnesota is usually the team that comes in. Last year was a little different though, because the Detroit Lions, for the first time in at least since the New Testament, they won the NFC. The first time ever they actually won the NFC North. Their last division championship was in the early '90s when they won the NFC Central. So looking at Detroit. This team has a lot of hype, and I think it's warranted. Dan Campbell in his 4th year, you can see like every year their win total just improves. So going into his 4th season, he's had 3 seasons, and they made the NFC title game last year. They've kept their coaching staff pretty much intact. Most of their roster is even intact. I mean, they had a couple of losses, like C.J. Gardner-Johnson went back to Philly, but it seems like this team is in prime position to make another deep run in the NFC. My question for you is like, give me an argument against Detroit. Like, what are we missing from that first opening statement?
Well, it's hard to find an argument against them. I'll be honest. I mean, as much as we like to, I mean, watching them blow it in the NFC Championship last year was.
Oh, it's fun. Like they won't win the Super Bowl.
No, they'll never. No. Which is, I guess, something that we can hang our hats on.
They're gonna win it now. No,
could you imagine?
Oh,
that'll get us some viewers.
Yeah, people will be like, in your face, and we'll be like, thank you for watching.
I found somebody that said they'll never win it. They have their offense is about as stacked as you could have ever hoped for. I mean, that offensive, it all starts up front with the offensive line. Like their skill position players, I think are good. They might even range on the very good, although I think outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, the receiver position isn't great. But because their offensive line is so good and they have a very smart veteran quarterback, they're able to do basically whatever they want on offense.
Yeah.
Defensively is where things get a little bit shaky for them. They did make a couple signings this offseason. They got DJ Reader, who's on the PUP list, Marcus Davenport. They had to draft Terrion Arnold after the other corner. They had to cut him because he was on like the FBI's most wanted. I can't think of his name, but I don't think he was on the FBI's most wanted, but he was wanted at a time.
Yes.
Their defense is I'm not really keen on their linebackers, and their defensive backs are a big issue last year. I don't know if they did enough. I know they drafted Terrion Arnold, who was getting into some scuffles this week, wasn't he?
With the neighbors. It was mostly Kirby Joseph, I think, that was like instigating that. But Malik Neighbors there's a common theme with Malik Neighbors is he gets into a lot of fights, but it's because he's burning a lot of people.
Yes, he's that good.
I know this is irrelevant to the Lions, but if you want a fantasy stud receiver, draft Malik Neighbors. I think he's going to be. We'll talk about it next week, but he's in one of my contenders for offensive rookie of the year. But I agree with you. Going back to the Lions, that's really the one argument I would make against it is that their secondary has some question marks. Now, they did address the secondary. Like you said, they drafted Tyrion Arnold, still a rookie.
Brian Branch had a good year last year as a rookie, a very good year, you might even say.
But they still did lose C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's been a pretty solid contributor on a bunch of good defenses throughout his career. And he's still not exactly an old player. He was drafted in 2019. So I think overall, the argument against Detroit it'd be on defense. Can they stop big plays? Can somebody besides Aiden Hutchinson wreak havoc along their front? Jack Campbell, their first round pick from last year in 2023, he's got to step up and be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah.
But you could kind of expect some of that to happen. My main question, I think, for Detroit is I think they caught a lot of teams, especially early in the year last year. I think, like Green Bay, for example, I think they caught the Packers at Lambeau Field when the Packers were not humming. The Packers were a pretty dreadful team in the month of October last year.
Yeah.
That's the type of team that, they're probably not going to get to play again. In terms of Green Bay, I think Green Bay is going to be a lot better. Chicago, the same thing. Like, they're not going to get an easy game against the Bears.
And the funny thing is, they didn't get any easy game. Like, the Bears blew the one game that Detroit beat them.
Yeah. Chicago is going to be a lot better. Minnesota, like, we'll talk about them in a second. Like, that might be the one team that you could say
they should be able to sweep.
But their schedule is going to be a lot harder. They're going to get San Francisco on the road. I would say, like, I do have questions about how sustainable their offensive production is from year to year, because we've never seen Jared Goff kind of do it back-to-back seasons.
Yeah,
Jared Goff is historically very hot and cold. You go back 2016 as a rookie, terrible. 2017, Pro Bowler. 2018, they do go to the Super Bowl, but he was actually pretty inconsistent that season.
Yeah, and they got exposed by the Bears in that, and then he was never the same quarterback again.
Yeah,
until he got traded.
In 2019, he did rebound a little bit statistically, but the Rams took a step back. And then in 2020, they made the playoffs, but he was like largely the reason why they didn't go to the Super Bowl.
Yes.
So like, and they didn't even win the division. They lost to Seattle.
They backed into the playoffs.
And they beat Seattle in the wild card.
They beat Seattle, yes. And they probably don't beat Seattle if there's fans there.
Probably. And John Wolford actually started the playoff game, and then Goff came in relief. The marriage between McVay and Goff ended really poorly. Like, I mean, he did not want to play Goff at the end of his run. Like, they were over him. There's a reason he got traded for basically, he was a throw-in, really.
He got traded like 2 weeks after the playoff game.
Yeah. And he was really the throw-in for Stafford. They gave up 2 firsts to get Stafford, and they gave Jared Goff just to get rid of him, like get rid of his contract. Detroit also got Goff. Now, to Goff's credit, he has been more than solid. Like, struggled in 21, but the team was so horrible.
Yeah,
like, they had no talent. In 22 and 23, he has resurrected his career, and he's really made a good name for himself. Statistically, one of the better quarterbacks in all of football. But the question we always have with Goff is, like, how far can he realistically take?
Can he win in the cold?
Yeah, but the same thing you could apply to Brock Purdy. Like, I look at this team, to me, they're like a less talented San Francisco in every way. They don't have the skill players. They don't have the guys on defense that I think San Francisco does. I think on an even playing field, I'm going to take San Francisco like 70% of the time. But I would say this team, to me, stacks up as the second best team in the NFC, as much as I hate to say it.
Yeah,
they are just really solid all over the place. They have playmakers. Like I said, the main question would be, can Goff consistently string together good seasons? And then the other question I really do have, and this is and we'll talk about Brandon Ayuk now. I'm surprised that more people haven't mentioned Detroit as a best landing spot for him, because that's really the one thing I think their offense lacks, is they don't really have a true, like, outside receiver.
Yeah,
Amon-Ra is not that guy.
Then you have Jamison Williams, who's been a bust. Yeah.
And
then they have Cleve Freeman too. I forgot was still around there.
Khalif Raymond's fine, but it's like he's a role player, and like I like Laporta, but like Laporta and Amon-Ra are very like I know they play different positions, but they almost like serve the same part of the field very well.
They're great players for that offense.
Yeah. But I think the one thing to really put this team over the top offensively to where they're like a juggernaut is they don't have like that X boundary player.
Mm-hmm.
And now the point most people would make, and I agree with this, is San Francisco is not going to trade Brandon Ayuk to Detroit. This is their main competition in the NFC. Not going to happen. But like I said, that's like offensively, that's probably the one thing they're missing. They got, I would say, the best offensive line in the league.
A great defensive punch at running back.
Yeah. Defense is where this team's question is, but there's not that many teams with great defenses anyway. So I'm not going to get them too much. The other reason I'm pretty confident this team's offensive production will translate into this season is their first outside game is week 9 at Green Bay. And they actually only play 2 outside games all season, or 3, excuse me. They play.
That's unreal.
At Green Bay, week 9. They're at Chicago, week 16, and at San Francisco, week 17, which is going to be a mild weather game. So, like, really only, I would say, 1 or 2 bad weather games. Chicago will be a bad weather game, absolutely. Week 16 in Chicago, but in Green Bay, early November, like that could still be a mild temperature game. So this team is going to be playing on AstroTurf almost exclusively. I think their only grass games are at Arizona, at Green Bay, at Chicago, and at San Francisco. So like 80% of their games are going to be on AstroTurf or field turf, and 80% of their games are going to be inside. So this offense is going to continue being dynamic, in my opinion. I don't think there's really anything to expect otherwise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, they just have a good formula for it to work well for them.
Yeah, I think this is going to be sustainable until really until like they got to. But I mean, they've already paid him on. I think this thing's going to be a pretty sustainable thing. I think the Lions are going to be around for a while. Next up, we're going with the Minnesota Vikings, who finished last in the NFC North last year.
Well, technically, they finished tied for last, but they got the tiebreaker.
So y'all get the last place schedule, even though you didn't. Yeah. Whatever. It's another break for the Bears. Wow. But this team, first year under Kevin O'Connell, playoffs. Last year, they took a big step back, but I think we all expected that. This team's in a transition year, I would say. Kirk Cousins is gone. I agree that getting rid of Kirk Cousins was the right move. I think overall
it had to happen.
They weren't going to win significant games with him. That's been proven over enough time that, I mean, they won 1 playoff game when Kirk Cousins was there in 2019 against the Saints, and that was it. They hosted a playoff game in 22. They lost to Daniel Jones. Now, that being said, I think, Sam Darnold is obviously going to be a step back from where Kirk Cousins was as a quarterback. Certainly. The main question is how quickly can JJ McCarthy, how quick can he transition into the starting role, and how good can he be? I think Flores can make the defense a little. I think he can kind of keep them mediocre. I don't think they have a ton of talent, but
especially on the back end.
They lost a lot of players. They lost Danielle Hunter, Harrison Smith. I feel like
he's still rolling Harrison Smith out there.
He's been in the NFL for like 20 years. I feel like he played next to Jason Sehorn. Like that's how long it's been.
He was in the same secondary with the Vikings as Darren Sharper.
Yeah, like it, and actually, the more that you joke about that, but like Harrison Smith came into the league like right after Darren Sharper was probably exiting the league,
Yeah.
and Darren Sharper's been incarcerated for like 10 years.
Yeah.
So, there, at least I think he's incarcerated.
I hope. Yes, he is. Thankfully.
Yeah, because of what he did was crazy. We don't have to talk about it, but like, but anyway, Mike, I want to leave that question with you. How quickly does JJ McCarthy become the starting quarterback, and how good can he be as a rookie?
Well, it'll be interesting to follow their preseason games, and I do mean that. I do like to watch. Like tomorrow, I know Carolina and New England are playing, so I'm excited to see Drake. I always love to follow the rookie quarterbacks in the preseason.
That's the only thing to watch in the preseason.
It's really the only thing to watch, but I do enjoy watching it. It'll be interesting to see what happens with JJ McCarthy, to see if he is, and that they don't fall into the trap that a lot of teams do with rookie quarter. And I think teams are pretty aware that when a rookie quarterback looks good in the preseason, it's usually because they're going up against second, third teamers. They're going up against very vanilla defenses.
I'll say this though, like, so last year I watched CJ Stroud play against the Patriots, and he was awful.
Yes, he was. And I remember that. Yeah.
2 years or 3 years ago, I watched the Jets against Green Bay, and Zach Wilson was awesome.
Yeah.
So even there,
that I was talking about, like Justin Fields has looked great, and Mitch Trubisky looked great when he was rookie in the preseason.
I still remember when y'all played, I think it was the Dolphins in 2021 in a preseason game.
Yes.
It was like a Saturday afternoon game, and he hits Cole Kmet for a touchdown. And Cole Kmet is open by like 30 yards. Like and Justin Fields, professional quarterback, hits him, touchdown. And I swear, like, there were so many Bears like people on Twitter going like, "Yeah, that's right. Yeah, let's go." And I'm like, he should hit that throw in his sleep.
Yeah.
Like, and then it didn't really work out. But I think going to McCarthy, going back, I know we get so off topic.
Yeah, no, we do. Yeah, so back to McCarthy. Ironically, they're on the TV right now on the NFL Network.
Stay on target.
I've seen some clips of him, like obviously you see the clips that Twitter has gotten very bad this year with showing clips of guys in training camp. Yep. I've seen clips of JJ looking great. I've seen clips of him not looking great. But the number one thing is, how often is he practicing with the first team? And if he's not practicing with the first team, then he's not really in their plan for a few weeks and into the regular season.
No, yeah.
Barring injury to Sam Darnold. JJ, as much as I love him as and they're talking about him now, as much as I loved him as a Michigan quarterback, and I probably did get carried away after they won the national title, which I don't care if it's vacated. They won it in my heart. And it won't be vacated. And into the draft process. But I remember even telling you, like, back in November, before, say, I think it might have been around the Penn State game, when Michigan literally didn't run the ball after the second quarter, literally ran the ball every play the second half. I remember saying, it'll be interesting to see if he ever can win them a game. And he did win them the Rose Bowl. He brought them on a good drive late in the game. Now, he did get some yak from Blake Corum on that 4th and 2. But I never faulted him for only averaging 22 passes a game. He never played the fourth quarter up until like the Penn State game. And Michigan didn't need him to throw the ball because they ran the ball so effectively, and they had the country's best defense, and they had everybody's plays. But I even said back in November that whoever drafted him was going to have to understand it was not going to be, because of the system that JJ was in. And again, no fault to him or his own. He was not, it was, I guess it wasn't, it was a great way for him to experience a lot of big games in college. but it was not preparing him really for the NFL, if that makes sense, because he just was never in too many like pass heavy situations. Because they had such a talent discrepancy against other teams, it looked easy even when he did drop back to pass. There was a few things that just kind of worked against JJ, no fault to his own again, but it's going to be some time before he's NFL ready.
And I think a lot of what JJ McCarthy reminds me of is like the 2020 Mac Jones like season where Alabama was, if you actually go back, like the Michigan team, that's like from last year, like I would say the best teams like prior to that was probably that Michigan or that Alabama team in 2020.
Yeah.
And Mac Jones was kind of the team captain. He was kind of the distributor, put up a lot of stats because, you know, you are playing with Jalen Waddle.
Yeah.
Henry Ruggs was gone by that point, but like you're playing with an all-star team, essentially. Yeah. So at some point you have to realize that, you know, I think JJ McCarthy has talent. I don't necessarily think he has more talent than Bo Nix or Michael Penix. So I think I would have probably taken one of those guys if I were the Vikings. But that being said, I think McCarthy has the ability to run an offense.
Yeah.
And I like the situation. So
he did land in a great situation. I will say that.
And in defense of my Mac Jones comparison, that's not necessarily the worst because Mac Jones as a rookie was actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then when the situation around him deteriorated to the point where, I mean, you've seen the Patriots supporting cast. It was awful.
It dropped off a cliff quickly.
And Mac Jones is a player that can't create by himself. Mm-hmm. I don't think JJ McCarthy is either. So I don't think he was worthy of a top 10 selection. That being said, I still think he can be successful in Minnesota. And you talk about a good supporting cast. I would say this one is one of the best in the entire league. Aaron Jones is a creator on the ground and in the air. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, one of the best in the NFL, and he's still, I don't even think 25 years old yet.
Yeah.
Jordan Addison, for as much trouble as he likes to get into, apparently, really freaking good rookie season. A lot of people sleeping on that guy. I don't really know why. I mean, I get he has behavior issues, but I mean, he was awesome last year. Like he really was. He was.
I think actually more people slept on him before last year.
Yeah,
I think people are warming up to him now because I think he was actually had a very surprising rookie season because
he was. Yeah, Jordan
historically
Addison,
his numbers didn't translate to success in the NFL, and he actually overcame that.
Jordan Addison made Kenny Pickett a first-round pick at Pitt, and I argue that I think he put Caleb Williams over the top to win the Heisman.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
I mean, I'm not saying Caleb Williams isn't good. I'm saying that helped him get over the top with him. Addison,
or Caleb Williams, if Jordan Addison was there last year, could have won Heisman again.
He could have. And Addison has been, very productive as a rookie, and that usually translates to year two. Outside of Puka, I would say he's probably the second best receiver in last year's draft class, and no one saw Puka coming. The tight end position, they're solid with TJ Hawkinson. They've actually been investing a lot on their offensive line. Darisaw looks like he's going to be really good for them going forward.
It's about time because it's been since like the early AP years since they had good offensive lines.
Well, and they hadn't in the past, they hadn't invested, but I think some of their picks are starting to kind of return results for them, which is promising. Defensively, I think this is kind of like, what can Brian Flores do with this unit? That's my question.
And you can only send the house so many times.
And I actually think, I have this team kind of finishing really poorly results-wise, and I actually think a lot of it's going to be because I don't see Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy winning shootout games, and that's what this team's going to need. But this team is doing something that the Saints have failed to do, and that's to take their medicine.
Yeah.
And you got Justin Jefferson under contract.
Vikings, really, truly.
The Vikings have had a good offseason. The only thing I would have done differently is I probably would have taken Penix because it would have been the perfect situation behind Darnold. He could probably come in mid-season. I liked his upside a little bit more. And the other, they couldn't have taken Penix because Penix was off the board.
Taken Penix, but there was all the talk in the world about them trading up to possibly put themselves in a better position. They ended up trading up like 2 spots or 1 spot or whatever.
Yeah, they wanted Drake May. So I take back my earlier criticism for passing on Penix. I still would have taken Nix too, but Nix and McCarthy are pretty close in terms of overall.
I would have, if I were them, I would have tried to do something to get up to get Penix. And like if I go back to draft night, pre-Atlanta pick, if I'm the Vikings,
they wouldn't have had to.
Let's go. Let's try to go get Penix.
But I think,
and overall, maybe they thought they were going to get him.
Yep.
And we'll never know.
That's what I'm saying. I think, like, in hindsight, who actually saw Penix going to the Falcons? I think they could have loved Penix, and then like they got sniped, and then they settled on McCarthy. We don't know. But and the other thing about quarterback evaluations when they're rookies is no one knows. Like, so much is dependent on how they develop within their system, and so we're not privy to every situation. Right. I mean, Nick Saban said it on Hard Knocks about Caleb Williams. He's still going to have a really good supporting cast and a system around him to propel him as a rookie. Right. Yeah. And that's an understated thing that most people don't understand. It's not, Drake May is going to have his work cut out for him in New England, probably, compared to somebody like McCarthy, who can probably sit the first 6, 7, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I think Darnold can help him tread water. But like I said, this team, I feel like, is in transition. I don't think they're going to be all that great this year.
Yeah.
But I think Kevin O'Connell will be safe in this transition year.
Yeah.
And so will Brian Flores, assuming he doesn't piss somebody off.
Unless he doesn't piss somebody off or they're absolutely terrible defensively.
Yeah. But I think a lot of it is I think his scheme will probably make them more of a below average defense instead of terrible. But even then, I don't see this team making
and better quarterbacks will eat them alive.
Yeah. With Sam Darnold, I think, starting, the one thing I'll say about Darnold, he had he had a really good prospect profile coming out of Southern Cal. It's been 6-7 years since he's been drafted. So we kind of know who he is.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'll say in the case of Sam Darnold maybe exceeding some expectations, he has never had anywhere close to this supporting cast and this coaching staff as a starter. You have to think he got the privilege of playing with Adam Gase. He had Matt Rule in Carolina with Joe Brady, who really wasn't ready to be an offensive coordinator in the league. You had he got to play with Shanahan, but he was never the starter. So this is going to be his best situation of his career. And Darnold has had snippets of good production.
Yeah.
But he has never had somebody like Justin Jefferson to throw. Yeah. I mean, DJ Moore is really good, but he ain't Justin Jefferson.
Right.
So that's interesting, but I don't think this team is good enough to really make any noise otherwise. Any other thoughts on the Vikings?
No, that sums it up pretty well.
The Bears.
Oh. After 30 teams, we're finally here.
Do you want to start or do you want me to?
I'll go.
Okay.
So, and what I kind of like that we're doing right now that we haven't been doing with the rest of, by the way, at the end of this, when we're done with Green Bay, guys, we're going to go through our division, just as a recap, our division winners, who our wild card teams are going to be. Next week, we're going to do playoffs, postseason awards, that sort of thing. But we're not, I kind of like that we're not naming how the NFC North is going to play out. Yeah. I like that. So there is a lot of hype. I mean, I won't lie. This is from a national level. This is the most hype I've seen the Bears get in a long time. And
since MVP Mitch.
But even then, there was a lot of there was people saying, well, the defense will regress, which they did. And
I think the hype is warranted a little
the
bit.
hype is a little bit more that's what I was afraid to say.
You're tying when you tie the hype to an actually good quarterback prospect.
Yeah.
Then I'm buying into it. Like
Yeah.
the Justin Fields hype was okay. Like I remember when I was like, he may be good, but he might not be.
Yeah, he might not be.
So we'll see.
No,
but this guy I feel a lot better about than Justin Fields.
They all right. So 2022, when Ryan Poles took over, we've kind of brought this up here and there through these divisional rankings. My dog is licking my legs right now.
JD Vance over here.
Couch is over there, dog.
Wow.
No.
Oh God, they're coming.
Here they come.
Oh, no, quick! No. I gotta make a Kamala Harris joke now. I can't.
Gee.
Okay,
let me do that either because
I'll do a Joe Biden one.
Steven?
All right. Oh! We're not political. We make fun of everyone here. Back to the Bears.
But 2022 came around. Ryan Poles made the hard decision. Well, actually, I don't think it was a really hard decision. Well, in some ways it was. But he came in and he just tore the Band-Aid off. Traded Khalil Mack. He cut Eddie Goldman. He cut Bilal Nichols. He cut Danny Trevathan. He cut a lot of dead weight that was on that team. He traded a few. I think he traded a couple other guys too. I can't remember. But 2022, they had more money in dead cap, the Bears did, than they had spread amongst their offense, which is it's kind of unbelievable. They had something like $83 million in dead cap.
We talked about the Saints not ripping the Band-Aid off. The Bears, they took
shredded
super glue. They took super glue and put it underneath the Band-Aid, and then they had the Incredible Hulk rip the Band-Aid off. It was like bones sitting there.
And you know what happened? They went 3-14. They were terrible. But they actually, there was some games where especially when Fields, they had the offense that was never sustainable, but they were looking competitive at some points in that season. They even they gave the Eagles a good game. Yep. The Bills, they won by a few touchdowns, but they scored 2 garbage time touchdowns. So last year we kind of went into the year thinking, okay, maybe they're going to be better this year. Okay, maybe Fields takes another leap, and they got DJ Moore after they traded the number 1 overall pick that they earned on their own. And the first 4 weeks of last year were probably, I'd say, the lowest point of my Bears fandom. I'd say easily the lowest point of my Bears fandom, because not that I had these sky high expectations for them, but I was like, man, this team should win 8 games. I thought going into the season. And when you start 0-4, we're week 1 in a very highly, built up game against Green Bay. They absolutely shat the bed. They looked terrible in Tampa. They got absolutely annihilated in Kansas City. And that was the first Taylor Swift game. And then to top it all off, they played the league's by far worst defense in week 4 against Denver. And the offense looked great finally in the first half. And then the bottom fell out. The defense couldn't get a stop. Fields couldn't read the backside blitzer coming on a play action boot, which he was never able to do. And that led to a fumble score for Denver. That was a terrible low point in my. I thought at that point, man, we're just never going to get this thing right. And then they started to turn it around. The defense got a little bit better. They traded for Montez Sweat, and but obviously he was a big addition. But one guy doesn't change everything. Other guy, Jaquan Brisker got better. Jalen Johnson was already having a great season, but not Jaquan Brisker.
Your
Jaquan
defense,
Brisker is
your
Tyreek
defense,
Stevenson.
it was like night and day. The second
Yes,
half.
they went from like the Broncos were the worst defense in the NFL at that time. The Bears were the second worst, which is saying something. Like they would have been the worst any other year. They became a top 5 unit from that point on. An incredible turnaround. They won 7 of their last 13 games to finish the season, and they finished those 13 games with a excuse me, like a plus 40 point differential. I mean, that's pretty and when you think about some of the games they lost, like I mentioned earlier, the Detroit game that they were up 26-14 late in the game. They blew that one. Of course, the Broncos game that happened early. And then the Browns game, they lost 3 games last year that they had at one point like a 98% chance to win. Now, that's not great, but they were there. They were close. They, again, made a tough decision this year. Do we okay, now we have the ability to add more weapons. Do we roll with Fields? And Ryan Poles, he's had a lot of conviction about a lot of things. He's not afraid to hurt feelings, which I've always kind of liked. He's a very business guy. And he said, no, Caleb's the guy. We got to go after him. And they didn't really although some Fields fans thought up until the point Fields got traded that there was he was doing all these things to just build around Fields. Poles was pretty honest, I think, in the whole process that this is where he wanted to go. But beyond getting Caleb, they didn't do with past quarterbacks. Now, past quarterbacks didn't have the same talent level that Fields has had. They decided, let's make sure that this landing spot for Caleb Williams is as good as we can get for him.
Yep.
They got Keenan Allen for a 4th-round pick, and even if he's only here for a year, I think that's a major addition. They got Rome Odunze. They just re-upped DJ Moore. They re-upped Jalen Johnson. Ryan Poles is showing. They re-upped Cole Kmet last year. Ryan Poles is showing guys that did it to Montez Sweat as well, that if you come in, you get the job done, you get the work that we want you to get done, we're going to pay you. That sends great messages to teams around the league. It's going to be better this year. I do think that. I do have some reservations about, well, we kind of knew it was going to happen. The interior of the offensive line is really suspect right now. Yeah. They haven't done enough to address that. I know. I think Connor Williams would have been their number 1 free agent target had he not tore his knee.
Yep.
So that was really unfortunate. But beyond that, signing Nate Davis a year ago has turned out to be an absolute disaster. He never practices. Because they signed Nate Davis, who's a right guard, they moved Tevin Jenkins from his better position right guard. Now, Tevin Jenkins is a pretty darn good left guard. But like Nate, well, although Tevin will practice more often, and I think Tevin's a better player, Tevin struggles with injuries. They haven't done enough to address the interior of the offensive line, nor I think have they done enough to address the interior of the defensive line.
Yeah. That's one of my main kind of criticisms, if there is any, because I think Poles has done a really good job.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is when he came in, he said, we're going to build the team from inside out. He's actually done the opposite. He's built it from the outside in. So we're getting closer to the interior of the offensive line and the D tackles, but we're not there yet. So are they, they're not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination. I know Nick Wright, and I wish he didn't say this the other day on First Take or whatever show he's on, said that he's picking the Bears to win the NFC. Did you hear that?
No, I don't watch those shows.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either, but it came up on Twitter.
So I think that's wild. No offense.
So yeah, they're not there yet. However,
He's a big Caleb Williams guy, though.
He's a big
always
Caleb
been.
Williams. Actually, Fox Sports in general, with like
The Pac-12 stuff.
Colin Cowherd and all those guys. And now
But they all live out in LA, so they've always been fans of him.
They're probably going to hire Danny Parkins from 670 The Score, and obviously he's a big Caleb Williams guy. You go ahead and finish, and then I'll give you my thoughts. I think they're obviously trending in the right direction. I think they're very close. They're a year away. If everything goes well this year, and I'm not one, you guys will get to understand, especially when we get to our week-to-week predictions, like on Wednesday nights when we do our weekly preview shows. I'm almost never going to pick the Bears, but in the past, I've never picked the Bears. I might pick them more this year, but I will say, if everything goes right this year, and I'm saying like if they look like the Texans did last year, they'll be a Super Bowl contender next year.
I think the one thing that I could see that scenario playing out. I actually don't think the Texans are that high of a bar. And we'll get into that when we talk about season records overall. Everybody kind of forgets last year the Texans kind of snuck into the playoffs in the last week of the season. I don't think that's totally out of the range of outcomes for the Bears. Yeah. I look on paper. I love the names. You mentioned Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift. I think they've done my favorite addition was Montez Sweat. I think that's going to bring more value than any of the additions that Ryan Poles, outside of the Caleb Williams draft pick, is going to bring in his 2 years as GM. I love DJ Moore last year. He finally found kind of a home that he's been missing. Yeah. For the talent.
He's not leaving for a long time, which
he is a really good receiver, and I think everyone's kind of starting to actually figure that out. This team, I think, is awesome on paper. And I think going forward, they're going to be a pretty sustainably good team. The question will be how high can they get, right? And a lot of that will be on Caleb. Yeah. I think this year is you have to look. The way I look at it is this feels like a bull trap to me. And I like the Bears. I have a lot of expectations for them, but we have fallen into this before.
Yes. The Bears are notoriously a team
that is a market that puts so much freaking pressure on this team. I don't get it, by the way. Like, just let everything play out. But like,
I know, but I'm actually not one to put the pressure, but I do kind of get it. It's
they were playing the Alan Parsons project.
The Alan Parsons during I was.
Can we stop comparing him to Michael Jordan? He hasn't played a game yet. Like, yes. I think Caleb Williams was the best quarterback prospect of the last, I would say him and Trevor Lawrence were tied for the best quarterback prospects of the last 10 years. And that's high company. I'm big on Lawrence. And I think Caleb Williams is going to have a ton of success. But the way that he is being marketed by people like Nick Wright, by Hard Knocks, that's my only concern is how is he going to be able to kind of handle that and basically get this team contending right away, because I think he can. I think I think this team could definitely make the playoffs. I think that's easily in their range of outcomes, which is crazy to say. 2 years ago, this team won 3 games. So I think that's only my main concern. And it's not even really a fault of Caleb. I think it's more of Chicago and the media in general. I just worry.
It's the new the Bears quarterback position is the new Cubs Billy Goat curse.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah, the 2 main breakouts at quarterback last year were CJ Stroud and Jordan Love. What were the expectations for them going into the season?
Very
jack shit. Small. Nothing. Like, everybody thought Jordan Love was a bust, and I even kind of thought, I don't know, we'll see. But and then CJ Stroud. I mean, we just talked about this, but he was pretty terrible in the preseason, and the Texans were the laughingstock of the league. I think people need to recognize that if they win 8 or 9 games, that's not a failure. And that's what I'm worried about with Caleb long term is like if they only win 8 or 9 games, are people going to think he's a failure, which would be ridiculous.
Yeah. That's what Nick Saban was trying to get across on Hard Knocks last night, which was a great message.
So take away the expectations and all the BS, right? If I'm just looking at this team in a vacuum, I really like this roster. You mentioned the skill players. I like them. Keenan Allen, my only question with him, he is way past the age apex for wide receivers. Can he stay healthy? Typically guys that are like 31, 32, 33 years old at that position, if he has an injury, his career is probably done. And it'll be one of those where like, oh, Keenan Allen's still in the league, like when he comes back. And oh wow, and he'll be on the Titans like next year if he gets like something like that. And well, that was funny. But because I thought about Adrian Peterson and Julio Jones, like great players, but Keenan Allen's a great player. But that's my one concern. But like this team could be still good without him. Like I like Rome Odunze. He was a really good wide receiver prospect. In a normal year, he'd be the number 1 wide receiver. But he was stuck in a year with Neighbors and Marvin Harrison.
Yes.
Like you said, I mean, your concern is the offensive line, but I could name you 20 other teams that have similar concerns. On the interior. And
I do like Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright.
Defensively, this team was a monster, and I actually expected to probably get better. And Eberflus, I love what he does defensively. I
forgot to say, I do have to say about Eberflus, he came in, and when they hired him, he was the most uninspiring hire they could have made, and I was never in on him. I really wasn't even in on him at the end of last year. I wanted him fired. But I did have to give kudos. There were people that also wanted him fired along with me that were saying to me, like, hey, you do have to give him kudos for what he did for the rest of the year. And I was like, yeah, but I know this sounds weird to say, but the glow up thing that he did, I know he is sexy now. I will say that. But it says something about him. It says that a man that like he's willing to listen to what other people have to say.
Do you think he looks in the mirror and he goes, ha ha? Like
Did you see when he had the white quarter zip and the white pants and his sunglasses at his 4th of July party? Man, I'm afraid
he took a note from Matt LaFleur.
They're hanging out at Marquette basketball games this year.
Yeah, there you go.
There was some people that were saying, obviously we know it was Eberflus's wife, but there was some people that were saying that Eberflus must have gotten divorced because because that was his midlife crisis. But I do have to say,
on the market,
I do give kudos to him. That I know it's a simple thing. Like you might say, well, what does it have to do with football? But like it shows that like a lot of football coaches are these like kind of, I guess you'd say, type A personality guys that they think it's what they have going on is like the most important thing, and nobody else is saying whatever they say to them doesn't matter. But he was like, okay, my wife and my daughters are telling me, it is kind of interesting too that this is like a new beginning for them as a team. Yeah. And here he's like, okay, so get yourself a new look, grow a beard, get your hair cut a certain way, wear new clothes. And I did even, I know Hard Knocks doesn't show everything, but I did kind of like his messages too in Hard Knocks. I hate when he says right all the time. I hate that so much. But the players actually love him for whatever reason. They think he's hilarious.
I think the success of the Bears is all contingent on what your expectations for this team are.
Yes. Yeah.
If your expectations are like to win the NFC,
if you're Nick Wright, you're going to be disappointed.
If they are to contend for a 6 or 7 seed in the NFC, I think that's totally reasonable. I think this team is plenty talented enough, but you still have a rookie quarterback. I don't care how good of a prospect he was. We've seen better talents at quarterback struggle as rookies. Like, Nick Saban mentioned Peyton Manning. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he has enough of a supporting cast around him, but let's wait and see. I think that's my main message. He's still a rookie. I think the Chicago Bears are, to me, this season is about setting up 2024 and 2025. That's my main thing. My last little note too is I'm actually not sure how good DeAndre Swift actually is. I was not a big fan of that signing.
I wasn't either. I didn't want them to sign him.
But if that's my one criticism for Matt Eberflus, then it is what it is. But last team, the Green Bay Packers. Oh, boo! Yeah, that's what everybody says all the time. Everybody's tired of them. The evil empire, as so many people.
Yeah, truly.
We're not the evil empire. Like, we've gone to one Super Bowl in like 30 years.
They're the big bad bully to me.
We're the big bad bully in like the PE class of 4 people. Like,
and they're the big bad bully of Appleton, Wisconsin, where there's like 60 kids in a graduating class.
We're the big fish in the small pond, I guess.
Right.
But anyway, this team, just like the Bears this year, I think went through their transition last year. I think the way I would look at the Packers is, which team are you getting? Are you getting the early season 2023 Packers where they were like 3-6? Are you getting the second half Jordan Love where he basically was the best quarterback in the NFL, where I think he had like 20-something touchdowns in 1 pick? Which Jordan Love are you getting? Which Packers team are you getting? That's the main question I have, because I think so many people are jumping on the Packers hype train. And we've seen teams like this where they are very, very good in the second half of a season. The next year, they're in the Super Bowl. Like we saw it with Philly just 2 years ago.
Seen it with Green Bay in 2009.
Yeah. Well, and that 2009 team was actually pretty. I mean, they won 11 games that year, so they weren't like, they were pretty good even in 2009. I'm talking about like a mediocre team.
They were 4-4. Don't forget, halfway through the season.
They were, but like this team was bad in the first half of the season.
Yeah, that's
and then
true. Yeah, they were
got
like
really
3-6,
hot.
Right?
Yeah, and got really hot, mostly thanks to Jordan Love. They were the only team that actually held, or that scored more than 24 points against Kansas City's defense, which is a huge accomplishment. That was one of the better defenses in the last 20 years. People won't even realize it because Mahomes is the star of Kansas City. But I think with like Green Bay, are you buying into that second half narrative? And then does it translate this year? If you think the Green Bay Packers, the true Packers of this year, will be what the second half of last year, if you think that team translates, this team is going to contend for a Super Bowl this year. However, I can't ignore what the first half looked like, where Jordan Love and the offense just were not in sync. Consistent. The defense was pretty horrible all year. Tell me, when's the last time you felt like, man, this Packers defense is going to be really good? Now, I was never a fan of the Joe Barry hire to begin with, and it, of course, didn't work. Jeff Hafley.
When you hire the defensive coordinator of the 08 Lions, you can't expect.
It didn't work out well. But Jeff Hafley, I think, probably an upgrade over Joe Barry, I'm guessing.
You'd hope. I mean, it can't get much worse.
We don't have a ton of NFL experience. He was the head coach of Boston College last year, which is also a reflection of where we are in college football, by the way, that an ACC head coaching job is a downgrade from a defensive coordinator job. And unless you're at Clemson or Florida State, like if you're at Wake Forest, you take an assistant coach job in the NFL. So, but Jeff Hafley is going to bring a new scheme. They're probably going to be running a lot more 4-3. This is the first
time since 2008.
Yep. This is the year defensively. This is where I got to see Pro Bowl Rashawn Gary. I got to see a 12 to 15 sack season. We were kind of robbed of that in 2022 because
I feel like we've been robbed of it a lot of times.
Yeah, he's shown the flashes of being awesome, and they've paid him expecting it. He's got to do it, I think, and for them to become that great defense. They have all the talent, man. Like if you look at every level of their defense, they've got talent everywhere. They signed Xavier McKinney. They still have Jair Alexander. You know, hopefully
Nixon's a great nickelback.
Yeah, he's a good nickelback and an even better kick returner. Mm-hmm. You have Eric Stokes I only played last year. First round pick in 2021. He's hopefully healthy. You have
who played in place of him?
Valentine, just a mix of guys. But the thing is, they have a bunch of guys that have experience that were like undrafted or late round picks on defense. Apparently, TJ Slayton is killing in camp and he's going to be a really solid interior player. A lot of like people like Aaron Nagler, I think he's probably going to be more of a factor than even like Devontae Wyatt, who was a first round pick for them. They're deep at edge. I mean, if you look on paper at their roster defensively, they should be a top 10 unit easily. Mm-hmm. But it's just like the classic Packer experience on defense is like you have Preston Smith lined up on Justin Jefferson. Preston Smith's a defensive end.
That was the first play of the game, wasn't it, too?
And it's like we planned for this all off season. Like this is the game that we get ready for, and we had the best receiver in football playing against a defensive end and man-to-man.
Yeah, 6'5" defensive end.
What do you think happened? Justin Jefferson gained like 40 yards. That's what happened, because that's what's going to happen every time. And so this team always has been like unorganized defensively. So hopefully Jeff Hafley fixes that. So I think on the optimistic end, I think this team, if things work out the way they should and the way I think they anticipate them, this team is going to be a problem for Detroit and San Francisco. Like they're that good. They're that talented. They're young. So this team's going to be a problem. But the question that it's still hanging in the back of my mind is like, yeah, but Jordan Love and this team, they weren't good for like 60% of the season last year. And that's still like that's why I still have reservations and why I still probably put them behind a San Francisco, a Detroit, those type of teams. I can't, and even the Rams, like that consistency at quarterback. I want to see a full season from Jordan Love. I think he can do it. I believe that he can, but I just want to see him do it. That's kind of the way I look at the Packers. But I think if you're optimistic about this team's prospects, I mean, there's not a lot to not like, to be honest. I really like this team. They're deep at almost every position. I think offensive line is like the only thing I kind of worry about because they've had some injuries. And they're still, they're starting. Like Rasheed Walker, for example, is at left tackle, but he didn't have a lot of pedigree. But like they find guys that in late rounds and undrafted guys that just like they play and they play well. So maybe even my concern's a little overstated there. It's mostly just can they get the talent from the players to translate to actual production, especially on defense and special teams. And to talk about special teams, that's the one thing that has just crushed this team. Like year over year, they really lost 2 playoff games to San Francisco because of their special teams.
Yeah.
That for them to win big games in January, they're going to have to figure that out. You got to start converting field goals and you got to prevent punt blocks. Like, I can't believe I'm saying that about an NFL team, but here we are.
Yeah.
And that's very frustrating as a fan of the team because it's like you had San Francisco against the ropes twice in 3 years and you let them go because your kicking game sucks. And that's really frustrating. But that's my thoughts on the Packers. I don't know. What are yours?
Well, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What do you think of Matt LaFleur as the head coach? Just give me one word.
Has to be one word?
Yeah.
I would say underrated because
Good. All right. I liked it. That's a good word.
Because I'll say why I use that word. Because at the beginning of last season, I was very critical. I thought his game.
It wasn't just the beginning. It was all throughout the year. And
Well,
here I was like, no, are you kidding me? I would die to have that guy as my head coach.
I think, and a part of it, I think, was my previous bias from the previous season, where like the Preston Smith thing, and it's mostly his ownership of the defense that always bothered me. Like where he always came across as like a glorified offensive coordinator and QB coach, where I was just like, your defense freaking sucks, dude, and your special teams sucks, and it always has sucked since he's gotten here. He has to get that. For him to take that step as a coach, like to become John Harbaugh, like Kyle Shanahan, those kind of like that level, where Andy Reid, where your team is winning Super Bowls or get like contending for Super Bowls on a regular basis, you have to take some ownership. You have to hire the best guys. Like Andy Reid gets Steve Spagnuolo, and we got Joe Barry. And I think that was like one of my big problems with LaFleur. Like I think he's a great quarterback coach, and he's a great offensive coordinator. I'm never going to dispute that. It's mostly like the head coach aspect of the job. Like you oversee the whole team, not just the offense. And now what I'll say is his development of Jordan Love, I think, changed my opinion of him. And I think the team was so young in how he got them to respond after a tough start to the season. That's where I thought maybe I underrated him. And that's why I used the term underrated when it came to Matt LaFleur. Because I was thinking like he should be on the hot seat. And then the more I thought about it, it's like, he's actually a really good coach. It could be way worse. Now, part of me thinks he needs to do what McCarthy did in 2009, where after the 2008 season, he went and got Dom Capers. And that won them the Super Bowl when he made that hire. As much as Aaron Rodgers did in that 2010 season, that defense was a top 5 unit.
Mm-hmm.
He's got, and that special teams was actually pretty good with like Timmy Mastay and Mason Crosby in that team. But I think as for LaFleur, that's his next step. He's got to. The defense is actually what I'm most interested in watching. I think Jordan Love will be pretty good. I'm like 75-80% confident he's going to be pretty close. He's going to be closer to what he was second half of the year versus first half. The main question is like, can this team be a top 10, 15 unit on defense? And and I'm very frustrated because I can't remember the last time this defense was that good. And like I get tired of watching Kansas City, Baltimore, Philly, a bunch of other teams, Chicago even, like periodically have the best defenses in the league, and we can't figure it out ever.
Yeah.
That gets really frustrating.
I think Green Bay is going to be very good. And I even said that to you after when Green Bay went on their run towards the end of the year. I kind of didn't really know what to think of them. I was impressed by the way that they did turn it around. I thought LaFleur was a better coach than what their team was showing in the beginning of the season, and then it did come to fruition when they annihilated Dallas, and then they ran.
That was the most impressive win.
Yes.
I think any team had in the NFL last year. Like the way they just killed them, and they killed Dallas. What people don't understand is like Dallas was unbeatable in that building.
Yeah.
And Green Bay like crushed them.
Yeah. It was over early.
Yeah.
It was never a game.
In every facet of the game, Green Bay dominated. And they were a bunch of kids, basically. Like the average age of that team was like 23, 24.
Yeah. They And then they ran San Francisco so close there at the end.
They had them.
And they had them. And it spawned our podcast because Steven was like, screw this. Like, you know what? Let's get back into the podcast game, because this is actually not our first podcast.
Yeah,
guys,
I wanted a reason to care about the AFC and NFC title games, and I was just like, I'm not going to watch it if I don't have anything like.
So we decided, that's how we decided that our phone calls usually are like this, where we just diverge into other topics. But to get back to Green Bay, and I told Steven, I said, I think Steven said to me something like, "Well, I bet you're happy," like he says every year after the Packers lose in the playoffs. I mean, and that's one thing he'll say to me, because he knows my team has been out for 3 months already. But
you did say, I think, like in the fourth quarter, you're like, after Aaron Jones had that huge
I sent the melted emoji when he broke that.
No, and when I saw that, I'm just like, because for context, this guy texts me 2014 NFC title game. This guy texts me and says, "Congrats!"
Right after the Clinton Dix pick. And you were like, Steven goes, "Dude, it's not even over yet." And I was like, "Man, just accept it. Just accept my congratulations." And then I didn't text him for like 3 hours when I said back,
It's one of the biggest meltdowns in like sports history.
But when he said, like, "Oh, I bet you're happy," and I was like, "Actually, no, I'm not," because this was not like when Rodgers, towards the end of the Rodgers years, I didn't really feel this way. And like, say, I didn't even really feel that way in 14 when that happened, or 15, 16, 17, 18, they didn't make the playoffs. But like 19, 20, 21, 22, like when those years went south for Green Bay, or those playoff games, or week 18 in 2022, it was relief, because as a Bears fan, I have a lot of respect for Green Bay. I really do. As much as I hate them, I have a ton of respect for them because of how they've won over the years. And I think they, as annoying as they are, they do have a good fan base, and they just have so much history. And that's why we're the Old Souls podcast, because we can have respect for those things. But I always hated Rodgers. And when every year towards the end of his time with Green Bay, when they would lose in the playoffs, it was like, oh, thank God it didn't happen. But last January, when Green Bay lost in the playoffs, and Steven said, "I bet you're happy," I was like, no, because we're at the beginning of this. And I go, this feels just like 2009, when you lost in the playoffs on a crazy final play, a crazy game. Not as crazy. This year's game wasn't as crazy as that one was, when you lost to the Cardinals.
The
Carlos Dansby play. But I was like, it feels just like that all over again, because I remember after that year thinking that team is going to win the Super Bowl. And of course they did.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same feeling I have now. I feel like Green Bay, I mean, we can't say for sure, especially because of who's sitting there on the other side in the AFC. We can't say for sure what's going to happen, but this team feels like they are a Super Bowl contender to me. And I truly mean that. Sometimes Steven thinks I say that because I'm trying to mush the Green Bay, and sometimes I am trying to mush Green Bay, but I'm not trying to say that right now as a mush. I really do think this team is a really primed Super Bowl team this year. I think if the draw works right, if they can get San Francisco at home, I mean, that's what I was trying to kind of hint at with San Francisco a few weeks ago when we're going over that, that it's going to be hard for them to get back. Detroit, I'm not sure. I feel like this is, I'm not saying I'm picking Green Bay to get there yet, because we'll talk about that next week. But I think, like you mentioned earlier, it's in any order. I don't know if I could pick the order of teams right now. Now we are going to go through our standings real quick here, but when it comes down to it in January, I don't know if I can pick San Francisco, Detroit, or Green Bay to win the NFC.
I think to finish up the Packers, it's mostly this team. I think the floor is probably 8 wins, like kind of like last year, 8-9 wins. The floor.
I would, yeah.
Yeah, and that's like if the defense doesn't really hit, and then Jordan Love is inconsistent. I think the ceiling is like 11-12 is where I'd probably put them. I think everything is going to come down to, can Jeff Hafley be the guy that gets the most out of this defense? They've got so many pieces now. I look at it like Xavier. I didn't even mention, like, Xavier McKinney was like the prize defensive back in free agency, and they signed him. They have, they have Quay Walker is a first round pick at linebacker that, like, he's in his third year now. He needs to make that year 3 jump. I mentioned that. I mean, we talk about their corners. Lucas Van Ness, like, he's in year 2, and he's like a physical freak, and he's not even like a starting player because Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith are still like the 2 primary edge rushers. This team has depth. They have talent, like first round picks everywhere, because as much as people criticize their approach at wide receiver, when you're not taking wide receivers in the first round, you're taking defensive players. They have all the talent that you need to win and to stop opposing offenses. But they have to have the right leadership and the right scheme and just everything like that. And that partly is going to, this is where I'm going to judge LaFleur this year, is if Hafley is a success, that's going to be where LaFleur gets a ton of credit, because that is an important aspect. And LaFleur has to take ownership of the whole team. And I think he's starting to do that. Yeah. I think back when he first started, I think he's like, and I know we're spending a ton of time on the Packers, but like when he first got hired for the job, like one of the main reasons they gave him the job, he's like, well, I'm just going to let Mike Pettin like be defensive coordinator. I'm like, in hindsight, I kind of hated that. Like, I liked Mike Pettin when we had him, but it's like, bring in your own people and like make it yours. Yeah. And I think he's finally doing that, where he saw Joe Barry and he's like, I can't keep this. This is not working. And he's taking some ownership in that. That's, if this team wants to get to the Super Bowl, it's going to have to, I think they have the talent offensively. We've seen the production. Josh Jacobs is there. I like Marshawn Lloyd. There's so many names. I mean, they go too deep at like every skill position at this point. It's going to come down to that defense. They got to produce more than they have in the past if they want to get that far. But let's go to division records or team records, because I've given like a range of outcomes in every episode. Mm-hmm. And today I finally did what you did. And I went through the schedule and I put a win-loss on every game. So starting with the NFC West.
Oh, you said these are going to be weird, right?
Do you want to go? You go first on your NFC West.
Let's start with the AFC.
AFC West.
Yeah. So my AFC West, I have, and I'll say that what their seed will be in the playoffs if they are a playoff team. I have getting home field advantage in the AFC playoffs. The Las Vegas, the Kansas City Chiefs. I have them going, I know this is a wild record. I had them going 14-3. I have the Chargers in second place, but as the 6th seed in it's like Selection Sunday, the 6th seed in the AFC playoffs at a 10-7 record. And then I have tied for third or tied for last, however you want to call it. I have the Broncos and the Raiders at 4-13. Steven? Uh-oh. I think I killed him with my Broncos prediction. Steven?
Oh, I'm back now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're good.
Well, that was weird. All right, keep it going. Sorry. My internet probably just stopped for a second.
So my last one, tied for third or tied for last, the Broncos and the Raiders at 4-13.
Okay. And so I am like you. I have Kansas City as the 1 seed in the AFC, 13-4. The Chargers at 10-7. I have them as the 7 seed.
Okay.
I have the Denver Broncos at 8 and 9. That's probably where you would laugh at me, like I said, because
I thought you would laugh at my Broncos prediction, but I won't laugh. We won't laugh at any predictions now because we've already talked about these teams, right?
Yeah. I have Denver at 8 and 9, missing the playoffs, and actually kind of collapsing down the stretch. I actually have them kind of starting fast, and it's because Denver at home early in the year. It's always a good bet. I have the Vegas Raiders at 5 and 12.
Okay.
AFC North, I have the Baltimore Ravens at 12 and 5. I have them as the 3 seed. Cleveland at 10 and 7. I have them as the 6 seed. Cincinnati at 9 and 8, which is probably a little surprising to some people, but I'm not that high on Cincinnati this year. And then Pittsburgh at 6 and 11. They're losing record.
And I have Baltimore at 12 and 5. Okay. The division winners of the AFC North. They are the 2 seed in the AFC. I have the Bengals as the top wild card. They finished in second place, 11 and 6. They are the 5th seed in the AFC. I have Pittsburgh and Cleveland rounding out the bottom, tied for 3rd, tied for last, 8 and 9, both of them.
Okay. Jacksonville is the top of the AFC South for me, 12 and 5.
Ooh. Did you pick them to win the AFC? Oh, that's right. You just picked ranges of outcomes.
Yeah. Right. When I went through the schedule, and I think the difference was that they're not playing the first place schedule, and Houston is.
Yeah, that's true. That's a big difference.
Houston has a pretty tough schedule, and Jacksonville does not. Houston, I have at 9 and 8. Little disappointing, but their schedule's so hard.
Yeah. A lot of fun games, though.
Indianapolis 6 and 11. Tennessee at 3 and 14. Just not high on the Titans. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I have. I'm also, when we're all the way done, I'm going to give my top 5 draft picks too, just because I think that'll be interesting. I have Houston, the 3 seed in the AFC, at 11 and 6.
Okay.
I have Jacksonville just missing the playoffs, I guess you might say, at 9 and 8.
Does Doug Peterson get fired if they miss the playoffs?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. And I have the Colts at 8 and 9. And I have the Titans last place at 4 and 13.
Okay. So you were on the same page mostly for the Titans.
Yeah.
And then I have Buffalo at 11 and 6. Miami at 11 and 6, but Buffalo wins the AFC East. Shades of last year.
Oh boy.
Miami just can't get that home playoff game.
Yeah.
I have the Dolphins like starting out like 4-0, 5-0.
Oh, perfect. Beautiful.
The Jets finish 8 and 9. That'll be just amazing television.
Oh my Lord.
Every Monday morning. And then the Patriots 4 and 13. Going to be a tough year for Drake May, I think. But yeah, so I have Kansas City as the one. Or go ahead, you got to do your AFCs.
So I have Miami finally ending that home playoff curse. I get why it's not really a curse. 16 years though is a long time. At 11 and 6, they're going to be the 4 seed in the AFC. I have the Jets as the last wild card at 10 and 7. So they just shade out their division rivals, the Buffalo Bills, who are the 8 seed at 9 and 8. So they will miss the playoffs. I think it's going to be a transition year for them. I think a 9 and 8 transition year is not bad, though. They'll be back in the playoffs in a year, I imagine. And I have the Patriots also at 4 and 13 in last place.
Okay. So I think seeding wise, I got Kansas City 1, Baltimore 2, Jacksonville 3, Buffalo 4, Miami 5, the Browns 6, and the Chargers 7.
So I would have Kansas City, of course, having a home field advantage, and then my playoff matchups, you might say, I would have the Ravens hosting New York, and then I would have Houston hosting the Chargers, and Who would that mean? Oh, that would mean the Dolphins are hosting Cincinnati.
Okay. Well, that's I think we didn't go crazy. I thought you would laugh at more of my Denver 8-9 pick, but then
No, we had our laughs about that.
Yeah. Okay, so in the NFC, I have this team is actually my 1 seed. And the NFC is kind of crazy to me this year. I don't think any team is just above and beyond the other. I have the Rams as the 1 seed. I went through the schedule and I feel like a lot of their matchups, like their tougher matchups, are at home. I have a hard time picking against McVay. In a lot of these matchups, and I don't think it's crazy to say the Rams go 12-5, which is what I have them. But I actually have them as the 1 seed. Believe it or not.
Okay.
San Francisco's the 2. Or no, excuse me. San Francisco is a wild card team out of the NFC West at 11-6, which I think a lot of people look at that as underperforming. But I just think the way the schedule kind of broke, they have a tough schedule too.
Yeah,
and I think IU getting traded affected my opinion.
Yeah, that's that even hasn't happened yet. But when we talked about them, it was thought. Yeah, it's going to now, I think. But when we thought for sure he was going to get re-signed, that that could be changing my prediction in a few weeks. But I'll keep it as is for now. But you finish up.
I have the Cardinals actually making the playoffs at 10-7.
Okay.
I am a big believer. I like Gannon as a coach. I like Kyler as a quarterback. I don't love him, but I like him. And I just like the way they've kind of turned the roster over. What Monty Ossenford's done has been pretty effective. Basically the only difference between the Bears and the Cardinals to me is that Kyler is in year 5 or 6 of his career. Caleb's in year 1.
There's the giveaway there.
Yeah. And then Seattle is 4-13.
So I have San Francisco,
the
winners of the NFC West, but I have them as the 2 seed. I have them at 11-6. I have the Rams at 10-7. I have the Cardinals at 7-10.
Okay.
And I have the Seahawks at 5-12.
Yeah, so we are low on the Seahawks in general.
Yes.
Okay. So I have Philly winning the NFC East at 12-5. They're going to be the 2 seed in the NFC. Dallas actually, from calculating this right, I have Dallas missing the playoffs at 10-7. McCarthy gets fired. Washington at 7-10. I have them starting really slow, and then like over the course of the year, they improve drastically with Jaden Daniels. I have them at 7-10. And the Giants, everything implodes 4-13.
I have the Cowboys actually winning the division. I have them as the 3 seed, 11-6.
Yeah.
Probably don't win a playoff game though.
No, never.
I have the Eagles making the playoffs at 10-7. I have the Washington, I was going to say the R words, the Washington Commanders at 6-11. I also have the Giants at 6-11, but I think those are going to be 2 different looking 6-11s.
I think our main difference there is that I just think the Commanders are a tier above the Giants.
Yeah. I think they are too, but I think that, like I said, I think they're going to be 2 different looking.
In the NFC North, I have Detroit winning 11-6 is their record. Green Bay and Detroit will be the 3 seed. Green Bay will be a wild card at 11-6. Detroit wins based off of a division record tiebreaker. And in the scenario I had play out is the Bears are the ones to cause Green Bay to lose the division and home field advantage in the playoffs. So final week of the season, because y'all are trying to play your way in, and y'all are 9-8. I have you at 9-8, which I think is a very fair expectation for the Bears. Winning record. And then the Vikings I have at 5-12.
So here's me, the Mr. Nice Guy. I have Green Bay winning the division and home field advantage in the NFC. I have them at 13-4. I have Minnesota in second place at 11-6. They are the 5 seed.
Minnesota is second?
Or excuse me, not Minnesota. Sorry, why did I say Minnesota? I was looking at their logo. Detroit.
Okay, I was about to say, whoa. Sam Darnold.
Yeah. No, I have Detroit as this the second place team, the 5th wild card, or I guess the 5th seed in the NFC, you'd say, at 11-6. I have the Bears at 10-7, and I have Minnesota at 5-12.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we're kind of in line. I just think Detroit, and I had Detroit and Green Bay as a tiebreaker. And remember, one game basically flipped Green Bay from a 1 seed to a 5 seed in my scenario. The NFC South, this one's probably the craziest just because it's like I don't really have a feel for this division. Somebody's got to win it. I have Atlanta winning it, 10-7. They're the 4 seed. And I have no other team in this division making the playoffs. Tampa at 7-10. I think last year was kind of a mirage. I don't love this team that much. Carolina, I actually have it 6-11. And sadly, I think most people think 6-11 would be an overachievement. I think this team, I think Bryce Young's going to take a step up from where he was last year, but this team is still not very good, 6-11. And then the Saints, I also have at 6-11.
So I also have Atlanta winning the division 4 seed at 10-7. I have Tampa at 9-8. I think it's because their schedule's very manageable. I think that's why I have them at.
It's always manageable.
Yeah, it is always manageable. I have the Saints at 8-9, and I have the Panthers.
That means the Panthers are going to be awful based off of the.
Yeah, I have the Panthers improving their win total by 50%.
What were they, 3 last year?
They were 2-15, so that would make them 3-14 this year.
Yeah, I'm just higher on the Panthers because I think Canales is such a huge upgrade over Frank Reich, and
I just think they suck terribly.
When I do like the additions that they've made offensively, I don't think 6-11 is not like. Let's not pretend that 6-11 is a ringing endorsement of a team. Like, I think that's one of the lower expectations I had. Like, only the Giants were like, I'm convinced are way worse. And the Seahawks I had worse, which is kind of crazy because the Seahawks have more talent. I think the Seahawks have such a tough schedule. I think I probably picked the Seahawks to go like 0-6 in division. So that's the way we have kind of the season playing out. Next week, we're going to do like basically postseason predictions and then like awards predictions. And that will finish out our season preview magazine for everyone. So any other thoughts, Neil, before we head on?
No, I guess the one final thing I will say, because I didn't say who the 7th seed was the NFC playoffs, but I did mention it a few weeks ago that I thought the Rams season was going to come down to one of those early season games. And if they won it, they'd get a tiebreaker. But I have them losing in week 4 to the Chicago Bears. So the Chicago Bears are the 7th seed.
Oh, so Caleb Williams goes to the playoffs, and then they win the NFC.
They do. They go to Green Bay in the divisional round, and they shock the world.
And Jordan Love throws a pick 6 to one of y'all's nose tackles.